Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm demonstrating how to make the Plaid Mood Mobius, which is a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. Please go to the link in the description. There you will find both right and left-handed video tutorials, a link to the written pattern, and links to all the supplies you need, as well as the other video tutorials referenced here today. This pattern calls for Red Heart Chic Sheep by Marley Bird yarn, which you can see here. Obviously, I used yellow, black, and white, which were mimosa, stiletto, and linen, but of course you can use any colors you like, including some pretty Christmassy ones. You'll also need a 12mm Clover Amour crochet hook, or your favorite brand. I happen to like this one. You'll also want to have some stitch markers. Again, these are by Clover, as well as your yarn needle and your scissors. Let's go ahead and take a look at the finished pattern as it is worn. Now this pattern is made in a big rectangle and then flipped and seamed, which I'm going to demo for you here today. But you can see it can be worn either as a cowl or as a wrap. So that's why it's just the Plaid Mood Mobius. Depending on your mood, you can wear it either way. Now let's take a look at the finished pattern on the table. All right, here we have the finished Plaid Mood Mobius. You can see it's got a twist in it. That's what makes it a Mobius. Although, truth be told, some would say this is a false Mobius because it's flipped and seamed rather than worked in continuous or in rounds as a Mobius. But the end result is the same, so I've gone ahead and called it a Mobius. Now, you'll notice all the fringe right here. That little fringe means we are going to cut our yarn at the end of every row, but we don't have any ends to weave in. So I love that about this project. Each row is worked with 2 yarns held together, and those that combo changes. Like you can see right here, this would obviously be 2 yellow strands. Right here is yellow and white. And then when they cross right here, we've got just the white and the white. So I'll demonstrate how to put that together here in just a minute. Now, I want to also point out that for this pattern, it's a really good idea to make something called butterfly bobbins. And the reason for this is because the yellow in this one, I used 4 balls of Red Heart Chic Sheep, but I only needed partial balls of the black and the white. So rather than getting multiple balls so that you don't have to keep breaking your colors every row and you can maintain the rows going up the pattern, you can use butterfly bobbins and just let them hang off the back of your work and pick them up as you go. Again, I'll be demoing this in a minute, and I do have a tutorial on how to make butterfly bobbins linked at the link in the description, so definitely check that out. I recommend you make 1 butterfly bobbin of your color C, which for me was the linen, and 2 of your color B, which for me was the stiletto. And then, of course, the main color, the yellow, I just worked straight off the skeins because I did go through almost all 4 of them. All right, now as I mentioned, you use 2 balls of color A held together, and that just means you find one end of each ball and hold them together and work them as if they were 1 strand of yarn. This is just that little bit I had left over when I finished my Plaid Mobius. So what you want to do is with the 2 strands held together is go ahead and put the slip knot on your hook, and I like to leave a little bit longer than the fringe I wanted to cut. You may have noticed on the finished Plaid Mood Mobius, my fringe was only about 1 inch long, but I like to leave a little extra and then trim it off nice and even at the end. It's just a little bit easier. So you don't have to leave a full 6 inches since you're not weaving in your ends, and we're going to make sure to knot them really well. But again, you don't have to leave a whole, you don't want to leave too little. You don't want to end up with ones that are just a little too short that you can't trim off to make them even. So that's it for that little bit of advice. To begin the setup row, though, basically you're just going to take your 2 balls of color A and holding them together, chain 42, and then break the yarn and knot it off at the end. So that's all we need to do for the setup row. So I'm going to keep chaining here, just working those 2 strands together, try and maintain the same tension with each strand, but you'll make 42 chains total. And then when you get to the end of that, you will break the yarn and knot it off. So I'll see you when we've got our setup row made. All right, so as I said, we make 42 chains and then we cut the yarn. So I'm not going to cut a full 6 inches. I want to be able to save some yarn, make sure I have enough to demo with here. But like I said, you can cut whatever length you like. If you want to leave your fringe longer, definitely cut a longer fringe right now. So then I just pull that through and make my knot like so. Then I'm going to make sure to turn my chain to make sure I work back the other direction. And I'll just sort of, oops, I turned it the wrong way. There we go. You can always tell by which direction those top V's are going. There we go. Now I'll just go ahead and lay it down so I can start crocheting into it for row 1 here. Find those ends of my color A balls again, and if you're following the written pattern, you'll see that there is a little code at the beginning of each row. This one is CA-CA. That means color A, color A. Those are the 2 strands we hold together to begin the row. So we start every row of this pattern after this one, or well, beginning with row 1 here, with what I'm calling a modified standing double crochet. So you may be familiar with the standing double crochet that I've demonstrated here on Moogly before, but with that we usually just start by wrapping the yarn hook around the hook twice. This time I want to start with a slip knot on the hook because we want a knot at the end of each end of every row of this pattern. So with the slip knot on my hook, I'll go ahead and yarn over, and then I'm going to find that first chain there, and I'm going to go ahead and just work into, I like to work into the back hump of that chain, like so. You can work into whichever part you like. Oops, but you can see I dropped one of my loops there, so let me pull that back off and make sure I've yarned over with both strands of yarn there. There we go. Then I can pick up my chain, and this part is a little fiddly, but just take your time. It'll get a lot easier after this one. There we go. Now I can go into that back hump of the chain. Again, I want to make sure I go under both strands, treating them as if they were one. Then I can pull up my loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and then yarn over and pull through 2. Oops, there we go, like so. And then I've got a knot right at the end of this row, so I know it's not going anywhere, and I can come back and trim that off later. Then we are going to double crochet in the next 7 stitches. So that would be the next 7 chains in this case. And these are just standard double crochets. Again, you just want to make sure to always get both of those strands on your hook. There we are. So that's 2. And then 3. And the neat thing about this pattern actually is that there are really only 4 rows of instruction. The rest are just repeats. So, and each of those rows has 42 stitches, and all of those stitches are double crochets, just like I'm doing right here. The only difference is starting in row 2, they're all going to be worked in the front loop only of each row. We just don't do that here on row 1. In fact, row 2 will be identical with row 1, except that it's worked in the front loop only, which again, I'll demo here in a minute. Now let's see, we should have, yep, we've got our modified standing double crochet, followed by 7 double crochet stitches, and then the instructions say to switch to color A/color B. So color B is our black, so I'll bring up one of my butterfly bobbins, and I'm actually going to pull that last loop back out of that last stitch. So I'm stopping with 2 loops left on the hook. I'm going to pull up one end of my butterfly bobbin here. There we go. And then I'm going to switch out one of these strands of yellow, sort of pull them apart here, however they want to go, with a strand of black. So I'm going to hold the black and this yellow together and work them together, and I'm going to work over that other strand of yellow so I'm ready to pick it up on the other side. So I'm just going to pull that down so it doesn't come through. There we are. Then yarn over with the yellow and black to finish that stitch. Then I'm going to double crochet in the next 2 stitches with color A and color B. I'm going to make sure that I work over that other strand of color A so I can pick it up on the other side. So there's 1. There we go. And there's the second one. Again, be sure to work over that strand. And then, before I pull through to finish this one, I'm going to go ahead and drop that black yarn again. Just go ahead and get it all the way to the back there. And I will yarn over and finish this stitch with both strands of yellow, like so. Now I'm just going to go ahead and, like I said, leave this black yarn bobbin, my color B yarn bobbin, hanging off the back of my work so that when I come back the other direction, it's ready there for me to pick up to finish the previous stitch going back the other way, and I don't have to cut that yarn every time as I work up the scarf. So after we make those 2 stitches, we go back to color A and color A for another 8 double crochets. Okay, so here I am finishing up the 8th stitch there of that series of 8. And now it's time for a color A and color C stitch, actually 2 of them. So I want to pull up my color C yarn bobbin, and I'm going to do the same thing. Pull up my end a little bit, set aside one of these yellow strands. Oops. There we go. And then, if I can get it lined up, there we go. Hold the color C and color A together to yarn over and finish that stitch. Then I'm going to yarn over, go into the next stitch. Make sure to work over that yellow again. And I make 1. Needed some more yarn here. There we go. And then 2 stitches with color A and color C. And then I need to switch back to color A and color A for 2 stitches. So I'm just going to yarn over to finish that stitch with color A and color A. Then, because the white stripes that run vertically up the scarf, or the color C stripes, I should say, are so close together, rather than making 2 bobbins and have more things flopping around on our work, we're just going to go ahead and make the next 2 stitches working over the white rather than making 2 bobbins of it. The black ones are too far apart, but the white ones are right next to each other, and it really doesn't create any muddying of the stitches to speak of. It works out pretty darn well. There we go. So I've almost finished those 2 stitches, so now I need to yarn over with the white and yellow again. And do be sure to take your time as you make this and make sure your yarn bobbins don't get too tangled. It takes a little bit of time as opposed to, just crocheting straight away. But in the end, like I say, it'll save you so much more work, not having to weave in your ends and not having to cut the yarn every time. So we've got our 2 color A and color C stitches, 2 color A and color A stitches. Now we need 2 more with color A and color C. Let's see, there's 1. Again, I'm working over that yellow so that it's there when I need it again, which I will at the end of this stitch. There we go. And then at this point, I want to sort out my color C bobbin, make sure it's not tangled, get it in back, because I'm just going to let that hang from there. Finish with the yellow, and then I make 8 more color A and color A stitches. Okay, so I have almost finished my 8th one of that series, so it's time for our other color B butterfly bobbin. Let me just find the end there that I left sticking out, pull up a little bit, and I'm just going to do the same thing again. Like I said, this pattern is actually very simple. It's just a matter of keeping your yarn organized and sorted and following the written pattern, which tells you where all the color changes are. That said, once you've got the pattern established a little bit, it is pretty self-evident as you go forward. You just need to see what you start each row with. That'll be your big clue. And then you just sort of react to the stitches as you come to them from the previous row. And I think you'll see what I mean here in a few minutes. But I just want to make sure, there it is, that I work over that yellow again so that it's ready for me on the other side again. There we are. So I can make 1. And then my second stitch here. Again, working over that second yellow strand. And then, before I finish that stitch, I'm going to untangle that bobbin there, set it to the back, pick up both yellow strands again, yarn over, and finish that stitch. Then all we should have is 8 more color A and color A stitches to finish off the row so that it mirrors the other side. Like I say, that's the fun thing about plaid patterns. They're kind of predictable, but it makes it easy and fun to crochet, and you get a lot of really great looks depending on what colors you choose. So let me just finish up this row here, and then I will demonstrate how to work the row in the front loop only for a few stitches, and then we can, I think, just take a look at the finished one, because like I said, every row is just 42 stitches of double crochet worked in the front loop only after this one, but it'll follow the same pattern. It's just the colors you start with. So I think we can just talk through it relatively quickly. You won't have to watch me make double crochets for an hour. So we should have just 1 more stitch here. Let's see. Like so. It does not want to pick up. Always hard getting that last one there. There we go. Alrighty. Like so. And done. Now we can go ahead and cut color A and color A. But like I said, don't cut those bobbins. You want to leave those attached so that they are there and waiting for you when you come back around. All right, so after we cut the yarn, we want to make sure that, again, we yarn over with it and pull it through that last loop to lock it down and put in a knot. Now, one note I found when I was cutting off my trim, sometimes you see that knot wants to push the yarn a direction you don't want your trim to go. You want your trim to stand out nice and tall, right? So what I found was helpful, and I actually went back and did this afterwards, but you can do it as you go or whatever you like, was to go ahead and just hold those strands together and put a little knot in them like so. Let me pull this through here. There we go. And this really straightened out the fringe quite a bit, and you can see now it wants to hang out from the side of the scarf really well. So you can do that to all your knots or just the ones that you feel need it. Also, I will say when I blocked this, I laid it out flat and blocked it before I went ahead and sewed it, which again, I'm going to demonstrate here in a few minutes. But I found at that time, it was also a good time to go ahead and not only trim the fringe, but make sure it was laying out nice and flat while it blocked as well. So back to the actual crocheting. As you can see, I've got all my bobbins sort of laid out nicely in front of me here, still attached. I'm going to turn to work back the other direction. Whoops. And you can see that flipped my bobbins. So I'm going to go ahead and take a moment to get those straightened back out here. Sorry. There we go. So you can see they're all attached and ready to go. Now they're on my front of my work, but that's okay. They're ready for when I need them again. I'm going to go ahead and start at this end again. Now, like I said, row 2 is just like row 1, the same color palette, except we're going to be working under the front loop only. So rather than demonstrate colored row 2, I'm going to move on to row 3 and make that as if it was row 2, just to show you how to work when the row starts with a color combo other than color A and color A. So for this one, for row 3, all the row 3 repeats, you want to have a color A and a color B. So this is one of the reasons we make a bobbin even with the white one, or color C, is because we're going to need it working across too. So you still want your main skein to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and separate these two yellow skeins. So I have a yellow end. Let me push this out of the way a little bit here. And then I will take my color B skein, for me the stiletto colorway, and pull up some length here and get those ends matched up so that I can work these held doubled. And then we are just going to work across again. So I'm going to go ahead and make first that modified standing double crochet with the slip knot on my hook. I'm going to yarn over, and this is where we're going to go under the front loop only. So if you aren't familiar with front loop and back loop, when you look at that top V, the front loop is the loop of that top V that is always closest to you as the crocheter, and the back loop is always furthest away. So we're just going to slip right under that front loop, which still has 2 loops for us because we're working with yarn held doubled, and make our double crochet. Just take your time. I find if you hold all these loops together nice and close on the hook, you get a little better result. There we go. And there's our first stitch. Then we've got 7 more stitches. Remember, we have 8 on each end. So I'm just working under the front loop only of each stitch across here. So you can see that creates, if I flip it over here, a little bit of a horizontal line, which just adds a little bit of texture and interest to our project. And at this point, like I said, you can actually read your color changes from the previous rows to know where you're going to be changing colors for every row after this. So let me get over here to where we've got our black vertical stripe, our color B vertical stripe. You can see it's coming up real soon. So I'm on the stitch right before that color change. So again, this is where I want to change colors. So at this point, I am going to drop the yellow skein. Let me get it untangled here. There we are. And then I'm going to work with these 2 black strands. So pull up some more from that butterfly bobbin and finish the stitch with that. Want to make sure that you don't pull this too tight. You see, that's a little tight. If I give it a little stretch there, that will even out, because you don't want this to pull too tight, because then it'll make your stitch shrink, and you don't want it loose so that it's floppy. Just right there is fine. Then I like to make sure to work over that strand when I work into the front loop only of that stitch. And that just helps tack it down a little bit too. Oops, I forgot one thing though. I also need to work over that yellow one to make sure it's ready for me. So I've got my hook in there. Go ahead and take that yellow, lay it over there so I can pick it up again on the other side. Then I can make that stitch, and then one more. Again, make sure I get over that yellow. And then, of course, I can drop that black bobbin again. Let me make sure it's not too twisted up with the other ones. There we go. Drop it to the back. yarn over with our original combo, and just back to crocheting with those until I get to the next color change. So you can see it really is that easy. That's how every row is made. And when you are working with a special color that's with your yellow, whether it's color or with your A, whether it's B or C, then that's the one that you maintain all the way across, dropping the yellow when necessary. So again, this is all in the written pattern. You can if you print out the written pattern, I would recommend maybe using highlighters or markers or something to help you distinguish the colors in your own colors, just to make it a little bit easier. But that's really about it. We're just going to, when we get to this point, then we would drop the yellow again and it would be black and white, etc., etc. So then when you get to the repeats of row 9, you start each row rather than, where'd all my yarn go? There we go. Rather than starting each row with color A and color B, you would start each row with color A and color C. So that's the row 9 repeats. Again, the written pattern goes through it. Let me pull up the finished pattern and we can take a closer look together. All right, so here I have laid out flat some of the Plaid Mood Mobius. Here you can see our row 1, and then row 2 again was just the same thing, of course, only worked in the front loop only. By working in the front loop only, that creates this horizontal stripe that you can see right there. So again, just a little added interest. If you don't like it, don't add it. You can work under both loops instead. This was our our row 3 repeat, which I demoed some of. You can see here's where we had the black and the black together. Here's where we would have had black and white, and then black and white again on across. So with all those bobbins hanging from the front, as you work back across, you can just pull those up as needed and then let them hang off the back again until you need them again. Rows 4 through 8 are just like row 2, same thing. Then we've got, like I said, row 9, you start with color A and color C instead and work across there. So then when you get to your color B stripe, you've got C and B together. When you get to your color C vertical stripes, you've got just C and C together, and that helps create that really beautiful plaid pattern. So that was row 9. Row 10 was another row 2 repeat. Row 11 is a row 9 repeat. And then we just have 12, 13, and 14, which are like row 2 again, and it all starts again. So the whole pattern for the Mobius, or the Plaid Mood Mobius, that's it, is only 42 rows as well as 42 stitches across. However, with this very stretchy yarn, I found it fit very comfortably around my shoulders. Should you need a bigger size or a smaller size, then you'll want to check for that before you sew it together and either add or subtract some rows. Whatever you need to fit you. This can be totally customized row by row. Obviously, since we're cutting the strands after every row, it's very easy to add more. You don't have to worry like, oh my gosh, I already cut the yarn. You cut the yarn anyway, so go ahead and add another row or 2 or 3 or however many you need. Or if you need to cut one off, it's not going to ruin the pattern. You can literally cut off that row. So now the Mobius part. Let me show how we put it together into the Mobius. All right, so after you've blocked your flat scarf and trimmed your fringe and everything else you want to do, get your ends woven in, it's time to create the Mobius shape. Now, this is the Autumn Amore scarf, which is a different pattern on Moogly, but it's a good rectangle to demonstrate what we're going to do. So you've got your long rectangle, slightly different proportions for this one, but you get the idea. What you want to do is take one end and just flip it over, like so. Just one flip. Then bring that end up to the other one, and those are going to be the ends we seam together. This is where those stitch markers come in really handy. I like to use my stitch markers to match up the end stitches, making sure to count them a little bit and make sure they're just lined up completely evenly so that when I sew them together, there's no errors and they don't get offset. Now you're sewing the ends of stitches to the ends of stitches, not on the sides of the rows, so it should be pretty easy, but it always helps to take a few minutes to add a few stitch markers just to make sure. So I'm just going to eyeball it right here for the sake of time right now, but you get the idea. You can get all those stitch markers in there, and this is the point where you actually want to go ahead and try it on. So the more stitch markers you add there, actually, the better. Make it a nice sturdy seam to try it on before you actually sew it. So you can try it on at this point. Make sure it's the right length to go around your shoulders if that's the way that you want to wear this piece. If you're only wearing it as a cowl, it might not matter as much, but again, this is a chance to try it on and get the custom size just for you. Since there's no edging or border to this pattern, you don't have to worry about doing this too soon or too late. You can keep trying it on as you're making it. So then you would just use mattress stitch seaming to sew up that end, and I do have a separate tutorial. That is linked at the link in the description. I'm not going to demo that today. As you can hear, I am still suffering a little bit from my head cold, so I think I'm going to call it a day on this video because I do think this pattern is relatively simple. I've demonstrated all the stitches you need for it, and I really think you'll enjoy making the Plaid Mood Mobius. Now, like I mentioned, I did use Red Heart Chic Sheep by Marley Bird for this pattern. However, if we look at the label, you'll notice somewhere on here, there it is, this is a merino wool. That helps give it a lot of the stretch, and that's another reason I say to try it on. It is stretchier than you might think. So even though the finished one, let me grab my instructions here that I printed out for myself, the finished size when it's laid flat is 21 inches wide by 42 inches long. It does have a fair bit of stretch as a wrap. So if you want to make this in another yarn that doesn't have wool content, I would recommend something like Red Heart with Love. I think that would be a great substitute. And it may stretch a little differently though. So definitely, again, try it on, especially if you're substituting yarn or if you're not wear size large like I am. You may want to, again, adjust that pattern a little bit to fit you. But I hope you will give it a try. I hope you enjoy it. I hope to have my voice back up to snuff again, guys. Sorry about that. I hope you have a great holiday season and happy crocheting. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.